A big hello and a very warm welcome to Brand Equity with me, Sonali Krishna. Well, today's show is unique and rather racy, so get yourself seated as we have a rather heady conversation. Now, have you ever heard of Ashley Madison? If you haven't, I'm not surprised. While India is well versed with dating sites such as Tinder, Bumble, Hinge for the single and fancy free, have you ever heard of a dating app only for the married? Well, I have brow-raising news for you. Ashley Madison, the world's leading married dating site, is setting up operations in India, offering Indian users a discreet space, believe it or not, to have an affair. For the uninitiated, Ashley Madison is the global leader for married dating with more than 85 million members worldwide since 2002. Available in 85 countries and 16 languages, the company's mission is to offer adults a platform to discreetly connect and make it the premier destination of affairs. Joining me in the studio today is Paul Keable, the Chief Strategy Officer of Ashley Madison. Welcome to the studio, Paul.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Okay, Paul, I'm going to dive right in.
Please do.
Before I ask you about your India story, what you're looking at, just so that my audience knows, you can throw some light on what Ashley Madison is, its genesis and its journey so far.
So as you said earlier, we are the world's leading married dating app. We are a dating app designed for married people looking to have affairs. And it's based primarily on the idea of discretion so that we can help one married person meet another married person to have what we like to call a successful affair, an undiscovered affair.
I see. So you have 85 million users, roughly, around the globe, and you are present in about 45 countries.
That's correct.
That's correct?
Yes.
Which is your leading market?
So the US is our largest market by far.
By far. Followed by?
Brazil.
Brazil?
Yes.
Oh, wow, okay. And then what about the rest?
So then over the years, you'll see a variation of the United Kingdom along with Australia and Germany and Canada, of course, all sort of round out the top 10. But what's fascinating to us is that India is the number 8th country in the whole world for signups in 2024.
So I'm assuming that 2024 is when the Netflix documentary kind of gained momentum. Is that why you are seeing more interest from the Indian market?
I think in part because we originally launched in 2014 in India, but due to the events of 2015, which is the subject matter of the documentary, we obviously had to do a lot of internal work, so we haven't been present in the market for nearly a decade. So there's a whole new generation of people who haven't heard about Ashley Madison. Sure. And through the documentary, which was the #1 show on Netflix, I think, around the world for about a week or two, they've been discovering there's now a solution to the problem they've been having.
You are entering India basis the kind of interest you've seen post the documentary airing and the fact that you've seen a lot of sign-ups. But why would Indians sign up when you aren't present in the market?
Well, I think because we do offer the service here. We just haven't been present from a marketing standpoint, speaking to our members in a way that helps them understand why does an Indian have the opportunity to Ashley Madison, what is the benefit to it? And so that's what we're really here to do, is to reintroduce the brand, explain the benefits of our offering. Because here's an interesting point. You mentioned earlier about how many Indians are using some of the more traditional dating apps. We've seen reports that up to 30% of some users on traditional dating apps are in fact married people pretending to be single. And if you ask any woman who's out there dating, she probably has a story of meeting someone who ended up actually being married. So what we're saying to these individuals is, why don't you be a little bit more honest about your intentions and have an affair with another person also seeking an affair?
Are you going with the same tagline, life is short, have an affair?
Absolutely, yes we are.
Yeah, you are, okay.
It's very straightforward and clear. It helps people understand why we're in the market.
Okay, I'm interested in knowing why you think Ashley Madison will be successful in India. Because the Indian market is a lot more traditional and conservative and religious than, let's say, the Western markets. Have you had any research which kind of throws light on why you think Indians will be more open? More importantly, as an adjoinder to that, have you looked at the kind of ramifications you will get from social activists in India who are very, very rampant,
yes,
right, and believe in moral policing? While I don't think it's anybody's business and it's a personal decision. And of course, what will happen when political, kind of interventions will happen simply so as to, kind of create a conversation, or the government is being seen to do the right thing?
Absolutely. So let me start with why we think India is ready now for Ashley Madison to come back to the market with a bit of force.
Sure.
It's actually the very specific reason why you think it isn't. Because it's such a conservative culture, because there is the presence of these moral authorities, as it were, telling people that this is not only wrong and bad, but they are going to shame you for it. A platform like Ashley Madison, which is built on discretion, is exactly why we will be successful in India. Because here's the truth about infidelity. It exists in every culture, in every religion, in every ethnicity, in every economic status around the world. Dating changes very differently from culture to culture. In India, very much so. But infidelity does not.
Sure.
And so the discretion that we offer, because our idea is based on the concept of matching a married person with another married person so they both have as much risk and no one acts in a way to cause the affair to be exposed.
Okay. And how are you planning to kind of push this narrative out in India?
So our initial marketing campaign is really going to focus on introducing the brand to the Indian market, explaining how the product works, what the offering is, and what's the advantage of having a discreet affair via Ashley Madison versus doing it in a more traditional way through a dating app that is meant for single people, because then you're going to expose yourself. If a married woman was to have an affair with a single man and he discovers that she's married, he's going to be upset because that's not why he was there, and it's going to increase the risk of exposure.
And how are you going to communicate this? What mediums? I mean, are you going to do big TV ads?
So we're going to start primarily through the digital marketing channels, through
okay.
the social channels, because that's where people are looking for this type of information. Again, in a really discreet manner, on your phone, you'll start to see ads talking about what Ashley Madison is. And what's interesting is we've had data that shows that married people will often sit in bed looking at their phones, looking at a variety of very discreet materials when their spouse is literally inches away. And this is an opportunity when the bedroom is a dead room. Ashley Madison can help you get over that hump and find what's missing in your primary relationship.
Right. And what about my other questions, which were about, social activists, government regulations on morality. They might look at you as a company that is spreading adultery, all of that.
So from a moral activist standpoint, we have had our detractors in almost every market we've been in. And what I'll say to them, and I'll say to you and your audience, is this: we're not in the business of promoting infidelity. Because if I could convince a happily married couple to have an affair, then our business would be 10 times the size than it really is right now. What we're doing is helping people understand really what's happening in the world of adultery so they can make better decisions. We're helping dispel a lot of the myths and misconceptions about infidelity. Because here's the truth of the matter. You could shut my business down as of right now and not one affair would be stopped. It would just happen in a place that is far less likely to be discreet. And as for government intervention, we've had that before. South Korea government banned us. We fought back, we won that battle. And the adultery laws have been struck down in India by your Supreme Court, which shows you that the moral compass is shifting in this marketplace. And there's another data point I want to bring up in terms of why we're going to be more successful here than a lot of other markets. Interestingly enough, when we look at our average age of our signups globally, they tend to be slightly older, which makes sense, particularly in Western culture. People are getting married older. It takes a few years to figure out what's missing in that relationship. So we often will find a woman closer to 38 and a man closer to 42. But in the Indian marketplace, it's much, much younger. Women 24, men 26, which tracks because in the Indian culture, getting married at that age is far more the norm than it is in the US or Canada. But at the same time, those are the Gen Z cohorts. And we've recently produced a very significant report looking into the trends of sex, sexuality, and monogamy in the Gen Z culture. And they are opening a whole new evolution to modern monogamy, looking at non-monogamy as a pathway where their partners are aware of, if not sometimes participating in that. But interestingly, from the Indian market, that still will require discretion. Because if you're going to have an open relationship with your partner, you do not want your colleagues to know about it. You definitely don't want your parents to know about it. So a platform like Ashley Madison will provide you that opportunity.
Okay, interesting. Having said that, you're re-entering with more confidence this time in India. But there are some things that the documentary kind of brought up in terms of, generally security, the fact that, I don't want my name disclosed ever if I do sign up. and other issues like catfishing and all of that. So let me come to it one by one. This big security breach that happened in 2015, I'm assuming you've learned your lesson there. So what has changed, and how are you convincing your users that that will never happen again?
Well, I think the culture has changed from a digital perspective, not just with us, with every organization, every digital community. We certainly, stand out amongst many, given the nature of what happened in 2015. We have invested millions in our technology, in our infrastructure, in our security. And obviously I can't go into extreme detail in terms of how our security operates, because that gives away a lot of details. But what I'll tell you this is, prior to 2015, we had security teams who were in charge of security. Now, while we obviously have a much more robust team, we also have a separate privacy officer. And most importantly, the culture of Ashley Madison is every single employee's job and responsibility is security and privacy. So as we develop new products and features, as we discuss how do we communicate with new members as they come onto the system, how do we ensure that that's part of it? And if you know your Greek mythology, we view it as a Sisyphean task. It's something we have to do every single day. We can't check that box and say we've done our job, we can go home today. It's part and parcel of everything we have to do for the rest of our business life. And by taking this approach, that has enabled us to be standing here today. We signed up more than 4 million new members last year alone. That tells us that we've rebuilt that trust, and it took a long time to do that. But we're in a position now where we can come to a market like India and be confident that we're offering a platform that is discreet and that they can trust us with the information that is, so sensitive.
Right. The other allegations, of course, were the fact that a lot of your women users were bots. Has that changed, and what have you done to ensure that bots are not available on the system? And more importantly, what is the gender ratio today globally?
Okay, so I'll deal with those in two separate spaces.
Sure.
Obviously, the company made mistakes in the past. That's unambiguous. We've acknowledged that. We actually hired Ernst & Young. So Ernst & Young came in, and they audited a number of aspects of our business, or looked into the business. And the first thing they said is, we want to look at the bots. We asked them to. We showed them every part of our technology, every part of our source code, and they've put out a published public report that anybody can look at. It's on our website, that shows unambiguously that their bots are no longer part of our system, nor will they ever be. And in terms of women on the site, it's a funny thing that we always get asked that. And the reason we get asked that is in part because of some of those allegations, but more importantly, it's because people have a bit of misogyny, because they don't believe women have agency over their sexual desires. And that just simply isn't true. And so Ernst & Young, in this report, looked at all the signups in that 1 year, and they pushed out the number that said there was 1.13 active females for every 1 active paid male.
Really?
Yes. What's interesting also, and it broke it down by a few countries, in some of our Latin American countries, we would see 2 or 3 women for every 1 male. And so we know that we have a good balance. In America, it's closer to 2 males for every 1 female. So It's going to change, and we're really interested to see, as we reintroduce the brand in India, how that changes. But I think, given the nature of sex education in this country, the conservative nature of this country, there's going to be a lot of marriages where we're going to appear, because independent research shows that 80% of the women on Ashley Madison are in sexless or orgasmless marriages. They love their spouse. They love their family. They don't want to leave. They do not want a divorce. What they do want is good sex, and they can't get it. And so they find a way to outsource their intimate needs to Ashley Madison, and they come back to us, and I've heard this many times. I've been with the company for 10 years. I'm a better mother, lover, and wife because of my affair.
Interesting. I'd like to see how the story pans out. Having said that, give me a sense so that my viewers also understand how your economic model works.
So unlike traditional dating apps, we're not a subscription or a primarily subscription-based dating app. Men buy a credit package to use to message a women.
So for women, it's completely free.
Right now, it's completely free women. And so for $599 rupees, you get 100 credits.
Okay.
And 8 credits to send a message to a woman. But what's interesting is, once you send that message, if she responds in kind, you can communicate for free for the rest of that time.
With that one human being?
With that one human being.
Okay.
And what's great about that also is if you do then find that you manifest an affair offline, meet in real life, you don't lose any of your other credits. And so that affair might take 2 months, 6 months, or a year, and then when you come back, the credits are still there, and you can continue to use the platform without another purchase. Now, there are other premium features and services that you can buy from a subscription standpoint and a credit usage standpoint to elevate your profile, elevate your message, that cost additional things, but the core function is a credit-based model. And what we think is really valuable for it, and particularly from the female perspective, is this. And any woman who's been on a traditional dating app knows this. Men will go on and they'll swipe on 1,000 different women because they're just looking to get as many as they possibly can. Well, obviously you're not going to do that with a credit-based package. Sure. And so it creates a far better experience for the women because men have to be more thoughtful about which women they're going to communicate with.
Paul, you've kind of, focused on the fact that this site is only for married people. How will you ensure that I'm married or not?
Well, that's the interesting thing. It isn't just for married people. We focus on our marketing message around the idea of how to have an affair. Life is short, have an affair is our tagline. But what's interesting, as I mentioned before, the core aspect or benefit of our site is discretion. And discretion is very attractive to a range of people. And I mentioned before that, interestingly enough, that there are people who are in disclosed non-monogamous relationships who are using the platform because they don't want their colleagues or their kids or their friends to know about these activities. Roughly 20% of our membership would identify as this. But we also have single and divorced people who use the site for a variety of reasons. Some people coming out of a marriage aren't ready to get on the traditional relationship escalator, but they still feel they're missing an intimate connection, and they find the discretion and unique nature of Ashley Madison very attractive. And so we give people the option to identify as either single or as attached. And we find that, traditionally speaking, Ashley Madison users are far more honest than traditional daters, which I know sounds like a bit of a contradiction, but the reason is because when you come to Ashley Madison, you're already acknowledging you're doing something that many in society think is shameful. And you're looking usually for a very specific type of interaction. And so you're honest about who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and not trying to be your best self.
I like the way you phrase it, saying what many people would deem as shameful. How does Ashley Madison perceive itself?
Well, let me say this. First, I honestly believe that we likely save more marriages than we end.
Why do you say that?
Because I said before, 80% of the women in sexless or orgasmless marriages.
Well, they have to get out of it, right?
Well, they don't want to get out. They love their spouse. They love their family. She does not want to leave her husband. And so by helping her facilitate what's missing in her primary relationship, she's able to go back and be a better mother, lover, and wife. And these are words spoken directly to me by so many of my members over the years.
But don't you think that, that's the foundation of that is not honesty but dishonesty?
Well, she could be dishonest to her husband, or she could be dishonest to herself. The feedback society tells a woman in that position is you either compromise and live a life without your intimate needs being met. That sounds horrible. Or you divorce. Well, that's costly, expensive. Now none of your needs are being met. And so we're offering a third path. And here's the other part to it that, when people say, how do we feel about our business? Well, if we were to shut down, no affairs are going to be stopped. But when you check into a hotel with your affair partner, are they checking to see that you're married? There's a multitude of businesses and services that help facilitate affairs. We're just one of many. And the reality, as I said before, we can't convince a happily married couple to have an affair. But what we can do is give them a place to do it a little bit more discreetly and reduce the risk of exposure, in essence, helping to eliminate digital lipstick.
What is the typical consumer behavior of, let's say, an average profile on Ashley Madison? How are your cohorts behaving?
So that's a fascinating question because there is no real average or typical.
Okay.
Because there's such a spectrum, and that's part of the reason I come out and have conversations like this, is to help people understand it's not what you think it is. Hollywood, Bollywood, our government, our religions, they try to give us this idea that affairs all look quite the same, and it's often, a successful businessman having an affair with a young intern. Well, that certainly probably is happening. That's not the only scenario. So I've had women come on the site, and I remember this one story where this woman met 50 men and slept with 30 of them in the course of a year.
Wow.
But I also have another woman, and this is a fascinating concept. She was having what I would term a compassionate affair. She was a lawyer, well-educated, well-regarded in her industry and in her city. And her husband, who was older, fell into early onset Alzheimer's. Wow. She became his caregiver, but she loved this man deeply. So she was never going to leave him, so she couldn't date, in a traditional sense, but her intimate needs weren't being met. And the stress of that lifestyle was, really putting her into basically a depression. So she found Ashley Madison and found an amazing affair partner, and it enabled her to be the caregiver she wanted to be and needed to be for her husband, who she still truly loves, but also have all her needs met. And so when people shame and tut somebody for having an affair, I'd say step back and think about what's actually happened before you dive into your moral judgment.
Sure. What would you say would be the most notable trends and insights your user data has kind of allowed you to kind of headline?
Well, I think the biggest thing is really from the female perspective in terms of understanding why women would seek to have an affair after being married for 10, 15, and 20 years. It's really fascinating. But I'll pull out two separate points just to sort of illustrate the types of affairs, or more importantly, when affairs are likely to happen.
Sure.
So there's one of the most prominent times is what we call the first bump effect. And when you get into a marriage, it's a honeymoon phase. It might be for a few weeks, it might be for a few years, but then suddenly you're pregnant. And now a baby comes. And now there's three of you. And that dynamic changes a lot of different things. And sometimes a woman will say, I'm a mother, I can no longer do those things you desire. Sometimes it's the husband who says, well, you're a mother, we shouldn't do those things any longer. One or the other says, my needs are no longer being met. I might be a parent now, but I still wish to do the same things because that aspect of my life has not changed. And suddenly affairs will start to creep into a relationship at that time. And the second most prominent time that we find is the empty nest syndrome. So you've raised your children. You've spent 20 plus years working tooth and nail to get them out the door successfully. And they go out there and then you look across the breakfast table and you're like, who is this person? I've barely had the type of conversations I should have had, and now I'm not sure what to do with you. And there's a loneliness that starts to creep into some of these marriages. And that's another time when affairs will start to crop up into a relationship.
Are you suggesting people have affairs only if they are disgruntled at home or with their partners, or they're dissatisfied in some manner or the other? Is that the only trigger for an affair?
Absolutely not. It's one of the primary ones. And what's interesting, that same study I referenced in terms of why women cheat, she looked at why men cheat.
Sure.
And most people just assume men have these high libidos and they have a lack of control. And it was the complete opposite. The majority of men in this study, looking again at Ashley Madison users, was emotional validation. They wanted to feel wanted. Societies around the world tell men they have to be stoic, emotionless, be the breadwinners, come home and be a man, and boys don't cry. If you tell a man, that jacket looks really good on you, he'll wear that jacket so often because we so rarely get those types of compliments. And so what they're often seeking is the idea that they're still desirable, that they still want to be wanted. And that will manifest in a physical interaction in a variety of ways. And then there are people who get married quite young in conservative cultures, not just in India, but around the world. And suddenly, 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road, they're exposed to a world where they come to understand sexual desires and needs are a little bit broader and varied than what they were raised to believe. And they want to experiment and try new activities, and their partner is either unwilling or unable to. And so despite those conversations, it goes nowhere, and so their needs are unmet or their desires are unmet, and often that will lead them looking elsewhere, which is where we come into play.
I don't think you know what you're in for in the Indian market. Once, of course, enough people know about you. My question to you is, I'm sure you've done some research. According to you, in the sign-ups you've seen from India, which cities are looking most promising?
Well, I think traditionally we always know that the major urban centers are always going to be our largest, but suburban communities increasingly are starting to show up in the Indian data. And again, it's very early on, but that makes sense for us because affairs are not just for celebrities and the sports people of the world. They're for traditional, normal people because life is difficult, raising kids, working. It's a lot of burden. You have to remember, in the modern world, we ask our spouse to be our best friend, our lover, our financial partner, our co-parent, our logistics partner, our household partner. That's a lot of burden for one individual. And so monogamy will not work for everybody. Now, it does work for a lot of people, but for those who it doesn't, we're offering a chance to sort of save their marriage, because so often they choose a bad choice in terms of where to have that affair, and get your needs met.
So basically, what's your pitch to potential Indian users?
Well, listen, life is short, have an affair.
That's your pitch.
That's our pitch.
But if I had to ask you, for instance, between Delhi, Bombay, Chennai, Calcutta, any research through sign-ups telling you...
Bangalore is our #1 city in India right now.
Really?
Yes.
Followed by?
Mumbai.
Would you know what 3, 4, 5 are?
I can send you that later. I don't have it on the top of my head right now.
Okay, and which is the most conservative city in India?
Well, you'd have to tell me that. That's part of my opportunity here. I'm still learning quite a lot about the marketplace myself.
I wouldn't have thought Bangalore would be your #1 for sign-ups. Very interesting concept, Paul. Lots of questions, I'm sure, for married Indians who are looking to have an affair. Maybe this will be their answer. Also wishing you luck for all the naysayers you will have in the country, but hopefully next time you're in town, we can catch up on how the India story is actually growing. Thank you so much for your time and, of course, your candidness.
Thank you so much as well.